Facts.
Well, it is a Friday, and looks like it's going to be a fantastic weekend weather-wise, with warm temperatures tomorrow up to 10 degrees and lots of sunshine, which is welcome. Also welcome, in my opinion, is the removal of the tolls on our two bridges beginning on Monday. Actually, the tolls are removed from what we're told on the McDonald already, but that won't last long because the construction begins on removing the concrete barriers, the toll booth barriers, whatever you want to call them, and the closure of the bridge this weekend. So, but listen, it's, in my opinion, it's a good move. I don't know that it was absolutely necessary. I'm not sure exactly why the provincial government decided to do this, but anyway, I think for me, I don't see a downside to it other than the $35 million that won't be collected in tolls and the fact that the cost of upkeeping the bridges will now be shared by the entire province. But look, that's the way it is for almost all infrastructure, if not every piece of infrastructure in the province. That cost gets shared amongst everybody. And some say, well, why should I have to pay for it if I live in Yarmouth or I live in the Valley and I use the bridge once or twice a year? Well, I could say, what about the road infrastructure in your part of the province that I never use? Or rinks, 4-pad ice rinks that cost God knows how much money to build and operate so people can recreate and play hockey and use them. I never use them. Never will. I'll never probably skate again for the rest of my life. But I still pay for it, and I'm okay with that. So what are your thoughts, I guess, on the removal of the tolls, something that you think is a good move or not? And listen, it's some of you out there have emailed me and called the show saying that you're concerned that the upkeep of the bridges won't perhaps be as good as they are. It needs to be mentioned that the Crown Corporation, that is the Halifax Harbour Bridges, that it remains intact, completely intact. So anyway, something that you can talk about. We have a new prime minister as of this morning as well in this country, which is normally would be pretty big news. But everything seems to be overshadowed at this era of our history by what's happening in the United States, and quite troubling and quite concerning. And yesterday, another example of this, as U.S. President Donald Trump repeated his frequently voiced desire to acquire Canada and Greenland on Thursday, this time with the leader of NATO sitting right next to him. He says, "I think it'll happen," Trump said when asked by a reporter about the U.S. taking over Greenland during an Oval Office meeting with the NATO Secretary General. He said, "I'm sitting with a man that could be very instrumental. You know, we need that for international security," he said. The Secretary General said he did not want to drag NATO into a conversation about the U.S. acquiring Greenland, but acknowledged the importance of Arctic security and northern countries working together under U.S. leadership to combat China and Russia. So, like, another question that I'll ask you, is it crystal clear at this point that Trump means business? Some of you out there still think that he's just bluffing with this. I can't imagine at this point anybody is that naive to think that he's still bluffing. Because why would he, when he can say things like this with the Secretary General of NATO? We are NATO, of course, we're a member of NATO. Canada is. And he can say this and not get even a comment from the Secretary General. I think it says a lot, and it empowers Donald Trump for sure. So, again, something that you can talk about. And, of course, Mark Carney, as I mentioned, will be the Prime Minister today, getting sworn in with a smaller, downsized cabinet. Are you convinced that Carney is the right person for the job? Why or why not? Is his experience as a central banker and economist, is that resume impress you? Do you think that he's better equipped than Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre, for that matter, to deal with Donald Trump and deal with the pressing issues that face Canada? Or do you feel it'll be more of the same? Carbon tax Carney, as he's been referred to, of course, by the Conservatives, another rich elite. And does being wealthy mean you're out of touch with the electorate? Because that's the accusation. This guy's wealthy and therefore he can't be in touch with the electorate. Or does being a career politician like Pierre Poilievre make you more out of touch with the real world? Poilievre says that's having that experience in government is what makes him the right fit to be the prime minister. So I guess it depends on your perspective. Lots of things to talk about, as mentioned, when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12 today. I'd like to thank Vanessa Veinotte as well on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job as always. All right, this story. Frank Palermo says it's time for light rail across Nova Scotia. The former Dalhousie University professor is now the president of Rail Connects Nova Scotia, a not-for-profit organization looking to raise awareness on the idea of connecting the province by rail. Frank Palermo joins the show. Hello, Frank.
Hello.
All right, so this concept is not new. It's been around for a very, very long time, correct?
Yes. We've been thinking about it at least for the last 10 or 15 years, I would say.
Okay, what are the reasons why this is something that you'd like to see come to fruition?
Well, I think generally, it's pretty clear that we need to do something, in order to be able to take advantage of the assets that we have here in Nova Scotia and to deal with growth in a kind of significant way that allows it to have the infrastructure that would allow growth to happen and to improve the quality of life, make it more equitable in terms of people being able to get from one place to another, increase our economic prospects in terms of attracting more business, more tourists here, and being able to get around in a better way, and just improving the quality of life, basically, in this area. The truth is that Nova Scotia, I think, needs to invest in public infrastructure generally. Right now, what the province is doing, and HRM with it, I think, is that we've become the most car-dependent province in Canada, the most car-dependent in the sense that, there's much less money spent here on public transit than anywhere else in the country. Public transit is kind of seen as fairly insignificant part of the whole transportation system. We try to solve transportation problems by just adding more roads or highways or fixing interchanges or making roundabouts. But in the end, that will not fix all of the problems. People know, because the congestion just gets worse over time with all of the improvements that are made. So in some ways, it doesn't matter whether the tolls exist on the bridges or not. It's like, sure, a few more cars may be able to get over the bridge kind of more quickly, but in the end, they're going to the people who are actually trying to get from one place to another are going to be caught up in that traffic. The experience around the world is that as a city grows, it's good to manage that growth relative to how it is that people are served very, very well by a public transit system. That it doesn't make owning a car, kind of the thing that everyone has to do, and that you need a car in order to be able to get from home to work, because that is not the way that the whole world is growing right now. So in a way, Nova Scotia is an outlier in terms of all of those things, and we really need to catch up, and I think we can catch up and get ahead of the curve. But we really have all of the essential ingredients here to invest in the right kind of public infrastructure, and we believe very strongly that infrastructure for Nova Scotia is light rail public transit, and that it's the best way to get around, and that system also has to work within HRM, and it's a way of connecting people around the province and allowing growth to happen in smaller communities as opposed to all of the growth happening in the central part of Halifax, of HRM, and all of that means that in a way we can deal with housing affordability in a kind of different way, because right now we say that we're dealing with all of these issues like housing affordability, but really there's very little that we can do because the cost of building, the cost of housing, and particularly if you're trying to do it in one area, is very high. And you can't really be in a place outside of you can't really find a place to live that's less expensive in an area outside, which might be in an area outside of the central part of HRM, where in fact it's easy to get from home to work without owning a car, and owning a car, of course, is very, very expensive. So here we are living in a province that's very car dependent. We invest the least in public transit, and in a way, this is the moment to really do that. And we think that what's needed is really a vision, a plan for Nova Scotia in terms of how it is that we're going to grow, double our population, et cetera, and do it in a way that really makes us, takes advantage of, as I said before, the assets that we have, and actually makes people's lives better from that point of view. So we feel that we feel very strongly that light rail public transit needs to be the central ingredient of the kind of new plan and vision for the future of Nova Scotia, and that it also needs to be central in terms of what it is that's happening in HRM. That is, and that we have to start all of this right now. That we can't have, agencies created that work in a back room somewhere trying to solve small bits of the transit system and the transportation system behind closed doors. What we need is like some light and energy and public input into all of this is our view, because in a way, it's not enough for the province to be announcing, the things that they're doing. That is that they're going to build, they may build a little bit of a link somewhere, which is light rail between two different places right now. That is not going to prove anything. All that it does is make a link and maybe affect a few people's lives. It's not a system. It's not part of a kind of strategy for the kind of province that we want. What we have to do is shift our priorities somewhat. Not that we don't invest anything in the road system. People will still continue to use their cars for many, many trips, but it should be possible to live anywhere in this province and be connected to many different places to work, shop, get health services, for older people to be able to get from one place to another without owning a car, for younger people to have the possibility of visiting new places and going to visit friends without being reliant on someone to drive them. All of those things are really kind of essential things, and we have to catch up in some ways to the rest of the world. We think that what we're proposing is a way not just to catch up, but to get ahead as much as possible. And we think that the way to do this is for government to kind of let people in, let the whole province kind of like get involved in this discussion, much in the way that your radio program is trying to involve people. I think it would be wonderful if we as Rail Connects could have some agency, some role in terms of increasing awareness of what it is that's really possible to accomplish with light rail public transit around the province, to demonstrate the difference that it would make in people's lives, and to value the benefits that come from it, because it's an investment in public infrastructure. And Nova Scotia is really, really doing a very poor job of investing in critical infrastructure that has a kind of long-term view of the kind of place we want to be. That's the only kind of investment that makes sense and is kind of rational in my view, and in the view of all of the people that I've been talking to for the last 10 or 15 years. So we think it's time for a change. It's time to let people into these discussions as opposed to creating a new group which is supposed to link some transportation systems. It's not links that we need at this point. What we need is a system. What we need is a vision. And what we need is, it's the chain, not a link. in the chain that's needed. It's a system as a whole that will hold the province together. And I think the time is right at this point. And Rail Connects just wants to be part of this discussion and wants to help this idea to move forward, which we think is key, as I said before, to the economy of this province, to how we grow, how we protect the natural assets that we have, how we do something about climate change, and how we become a much more equitable kind of place that is really a good place to grow old in, a good place to grow up in, and a great place to build a future on. Because right now, even though we were saying just a couple of months ago that growth was insane, many people were moving here, et cetera, a lot of those people that did try to move here have actually found that they can't support being here, that it's not as affordable as they thought it was going to be here, and that simply not having public transit is one of those key ingredients that's causing people not to move here, or people that do move here find that they can't actually stay here. So they're going to bigger centers that actually have those kinds of that kind of public infrastructure.
Okay, Frank. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. We'll talk again.
Okay.
All right,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Frank Palermo, obviously pretty passionate about the issue. A lot of information there. Anyway, senior locked out of apartment after successfully fighting landlord-use eviction. We'll talk with that senior when we come back. All right, this on the Dalhousie Legal Aid Service website. A senior locked out of apartment after successfully fighting landlord-use eviction. Joining me to discuss all of this is Floyd Poulain, who is indeed that senior. Floyd, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Todd. It's nice to be here.
All right. I guess share your story, first of all. That would be the best way to start.
Well, it's a landlord eviction problem. So people come in where wealthy people bought the building, and then they wanted their own family moving in to the building. And my apartment was just one of those. And the law state very clearly in Tennessee that you can't put your own relatives in the building. So there were circumstances there. So as we went on, we went to the Tennessee board. We filed our claim, and I won the situation. So I was planning on staying there, but it became such an unruly mess that they just kicked all my stuff out when I was at work one day. I came home and all my stuff was gone. A guy called me up from the apartment, throwing all your stuff out of the building. So I called my lawyer, Miss Sydney Bloom, and she called the police. Mr. Constable Scott showed up, and he couldn't do anything about it because they started their evictions and they had the apartment all tore apart. So at that point, I was out on the street, so without any of my belongings or anything, everything was gone. So it was a terrible situation. I called some friends of mine, and I had to crash at a friend's place for a while until I could sort out a permanent place to stay, which is very difficult in the situation because rent is so high. But my apartment, I was paying $737 per month, and after they did that to me, and they're now renting it to another person, and they're looking for $1,450 a month. It's the new people are paying. So all the people in the building got stung like that. So it's quite sad that the tenancy board really doesn't have any teeth, not even with the police department, because it's almost like criminal behavior. They got all my stuff out in the ground. They threw it all in the garbage can, and they did all the renovation, and they're charging $1,450. That's like gangsterism or criminal behavior on behalf of these business people. So it's not very healthy in our community of Halifax to have such a venue on the go. Mm. Money rules and laws don't mean anything. Laws mean some good to my family and our community, but the money people, we just can't win. And the tenancy board and the government needs to get together with some legislation and put some teeth into the tenancy board, because this is a very sad situation. I never experienced anything like this in my life. Homeless, they have no respect for that. They're making people homeless. Yeah. And the laws don't mean anything. So how do we put some teeth in the tenancy board so they can have some power, so they can protect my rights as a Canadian, as a Halifax person, we have no rights.
Yeah.
It's we're making people homeless. Have an awful lot of homeless people downtown in Sackville and over Dartmouth, and they're being home. They don't drink. A lot of them do not smoke, and they don't drink. There's a good people out there suffering because the tendency just doesn't have the teeth it takes to resolve the situation.
So where are you staying now, Floyd? What did you do?
Actually, I called a friend of mine, and a couple of friends. I actually called about 20 of them. I got a big list. Anyway, one of my friends came through for me, and I'm staying with this lady now. I got a room. She gave me a room. The roof doesn't leak, and the heat is on. But she's a very nice and warm and loving person. But she has some serious problems. Like she has diabetes. She has a walker. She has care workers come in once a week, and there's cleaning people that come in once a week to look after her. And I'm kind of there. There needs to be some things done in the bathroom every day for her and stuff like that. So she enjoys my company, and she's a really nice person, and I found a place to live. So, but my standards have been lowered very substantially from my apartment. My foundation of my life has been eroded, and I've been lowered. My living standards are lowered very substantially because of the situation, and we won the case. So winning and losing is the same thing. So I called the premier there, and I left a message there for him. I was trying to get him on the phone so he can make some kind of a presentation to the legislature to beef up the laws for the tenancy board, but he never got back to me yet.
All right. So you won the case, and despite that, this company at 171 Maine who owns this property still, you went to work and you came home and they were throwing your stuff out in the garbage in the dumpster, and you had no idea that was going to happen. I can't imagine what that would feel like.
Oh, it was absolutely terrible. It was a pathetic situation. I had a good job, and the stress and everything else from the job. It was a terrible feeling. I feel like I was living in a war zone where I needed a couple of bodyguards to rescue my personal affairs. You know, it's terrible to stand alone on a corner with a reporter from CBC and watch it and analyze this situation. It was very disheartening because this is the year 2025. Have we not graduated anything in our constitution and our way of life? A lot of good companies live in Nova Scotia and they don't do that to other things. There's a certain code of ethics that other companies and corporations have, but some of these money people that come in and buy these big buildings and do this to our local citizens, it's criminal. I called my lawyer, and I'm trying to get charges pressed against the people that did this to me. And it's hard to do that under the tenancy board. But I say it's bypassed the tenancy board. It's criminal behavior now. The owner of the company should be fingerprinted and charged with theft over $5,000. Because I lost my weights and I lost my desk that I have that my mother used to sit there and write letters on, and all kinds of good stuff there. My stereo. My desk in the corner, and that there used to be our little place where we used to keep our equipment for storms and whatever, and that's all gone. That living foundation of a home environment is totally no respect for the poor or for the living, working band at all. So, but I'm just at a loss to find an answer to the problem. But something should be done. Something must be done. And I don't know which avenue to go to do that, but it starts right here with your people and in the listening audience that somebody must rise and try to do something. I'm just a poor man full of paperwork. They're loading me up with all kinds of paperwork, and Legal Aid is an excellent place, and people were very good to me, and they treated me very well and gave me all the legal information they could to help me out. But the community at large, someone must rise up and stop this kind of behavior. But that's at 171 Main Avenue. It was a nice place to live, and everything was pretty cool. All the residents got along. There was no violence. There was no nothing. It was really a good family, and everybody looked after each other. Some needed a ride somewhere, whatever. It was just a good community, but it's been totally eroded. And you couldn't even park your vehicle down there after the rent eviction. They wanted another $75 a month for the rent. They wanted $1,450 for my apartment. Now it's rented to somebody else. And the guy upstairs, he's getting $1,750 for the apartment. Before that, he was only paying $750. So it's gangsterism.
Okay, Floyd.
It's criminal.
Yeah.
Something should be done. Something must be done. I don't know how to do it, but I made a few phone calls to get somebody back to me to start a process whereby we don't have to tolerate this kind of illegal behavior. So
Okay.
how do you win?
Yeah, Floyd, we're just out of time. Listen, thanks for sharing your story. I'm sad to hear that this happened to you, and let's follow up on it, Floyd. Thanks for the call, or thanks for doing this. We appreciate it. We'll keep in touch.
Very much so. You too.
All right, take care. That's a sad story for sure. Floyd Poulain. And I'm sure that there are many, many other people listening right now could share similar examples and stories that they're dealing with in HRM. Is homelessness is a growing problem for sure. Politics with Don Desserud when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat is Don Desserud, UPEI political science professor. Don Desserud, thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time, of course.
You're very welcome, Todd.
All right, so I guess an historic day whenever we have a prime minister sworn in, and but like a lot of things, overshadowed by what's going on in the United States and Donald Trump. That shadow of tariffs and this war, it seems to really be quite pervasive, eh?
Yeah, it's a cliche now that the oxygen sucks the oxygen out of the room, but It's absolutely true. No story can seem to break through to these, and if it's not this story, it's going to be another one, and that's a problem in a way for someone like a Mark Carney who really needs to get his name out there. People like us know exactly who he is. I've been following him quite carefully, but his brand recognition right now is not probably what the Liberal Party wants. So they're going to have to figure some way to make sure that people know who he is and what he stands for, and able to use that in the next election, whenever that is.
All right, the fact that he doesn't have a seat, never been elected, some people feel as though that's undemocratic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you don't want this to go on for very long. I mean, it is a good reminder that at the end of the day, the Prime Minister is the person that has the support of a majority of the members of the House of Commons. The trick is, the House of Commons has to sort of meet in order to make that decision. But, at the end of the day, that's who it is. And yes, he should have a seat. I think it's a good question to ask whether this is the best way to deal with a Prime Minister resigning. But he will be the Prime Minister. It's not an acting role. It's the real thing. He will want to get a seat as soon as possible. I would be astonished, though it would be really intriguing if there was some way in which he was able to avoid an election very soon. Go into a by-election, meet the House as a sitting member. But that's a lot of ifs. So probably, as a consequence, we will be going into an election campaign fairly soon, and then this situation will be no longer an issue.
Would it be advantageous, though, to get an election right away because ride whatever type of momentum that the lift that they've gotten out of all of this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to go. I have one hand, other hand, another, and maybe from 4 different hands on this one because it's a tricky question. So probably that's what he'll do. Probably because the other options are not that palatable. But what he wants to avoid is this scenario: the House reconvenes after prorogation. They have the speech from the throne. They come back and vote on that, the address and reply. They lose that vote, so that's a serious vote of non-confidence. Therefore, an election is called, and there's a dissolution, and we have an election. Now, what's wrong with that are 2 things. Number one is that he's the Prime Minister who oversaw the defeat of his government. Number 2, he's not there. He's not in the House, to direct the show, so to speak. So it's a double problem. The optics are really bad in that way. So he wants to avoid that. But on the other hand, an election right now, I mean, I think he's an impressive person. Of course, he's got an incredible CV, but he doesn't have the experience of being a political leader, let alone a prime minister. And going into an election campaign could mean a lot of fumbles and without little time to recover. And the third thing that would concern me is that everyone says we need to have everything in place to deal with the United States. But there's going to be a 6 weeks period of time in which we're focusing on arguing with each other at the time when we need to have a united front dealing with the United States. So election campaign is going to be a bit awkward at this time. So there's a lot of variables out there. It's not going to be simple. At the end of the day, I still think that he will call an election sooner than later. In fact, very, very soon. But I do wonder whether there's a lot of danger in that as well.
I think any way you look at it, it's been an upgrade for the Liberals when it comes to getting elected and winning back some seats or winning back some of the Liberal fold, or perhaps convincing people to join the Liberal fold over what Trudeau would have brought to the table. What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely, and it's sometimes it's just because it's a change, but it's been a remarkable change in polling numbers, and also in the enthusiasm. The number of I've lost count, and I'm not even sure anymore who's reoffering, who's not reoffering, because a number of people who said they were not going to reoffer are now saying, well, gee, maybe I will. Of seats that I would have, if you had asked me this 2 months ago, a month ago, I would have said no, they have no chance of winning now, are back in play. The mood of the party is completely different. It was you would just remember the days when the MPs were pushing for Trudeau to resign, like what they were saying, the problems they were talking about. That they're not speaking that way anymore. My caution, as usual, though, is when we're looking at these polls, when there's that kind of volatility, when the support for the Liberal Party goes up that far that quickly, it can also go down that far that quickly. Mm-hmm. That means that right now we're in a situation where people are quick to change their mind, and if they're quick to change their mind, they'll be quick to change it again. So this is a really unstable period. But if you're a Liberal, you must be just beside yourself, because who would have thought that this was going to happen? If you're thinking of those early days in January.
Yeah, the Conservatives are scrambling to discredit Carney, and I'm not sure that there's anybody left convincing that is willing to move on this. Do you think that their camp is entrenched at this point, or can their for lack of a better term, fear-mongering about Carney win some people over? Yeah,
I think that what's the expression? A horse has gone out of the barn, or it's something. There's probably not the right one, but no, I think that's a problem for them right now. That their latest ads are basically the same ad they had before, which carbon tax Carney, he's just like Trudeau. But now they've tacked Donald Trump onto the ads to say that somehow there's a connection, which when you look at the ad, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, frankly. And when you compare that to the attack ads, and that's what they are, that the Liberals are launching against Poilievre by basically pairing him directly with Trump, and using the same language, showing how they're both using the same language. Those are far more effective if they think that that's what is going to convince voters. So the CPC has been quite slow to pivot on this one. It was not an accident that the very first thing that Mark Carney said once he was declared the winner was that the carbon tax is gone. That puts that issue away. Now I would not underestimate their ability to figure this out. And once the actual election campaign goes into effect, then I suspect that they'll try something different. But right now, that one is looking backwards when the country right now is looking ahead to see what's going to happen, and there's a lot of concern, as you can imagine, with threats from the United States. So they're not on board on that one yet, and they probably will. But right now, that I don't think that campaign is working for them at all.
I would think for Mark Carney, though, that he's the prime minister, but it's almost like kind of being half pregnant in a way. He's not won an election, and he's got an election looming, so that's got to influence how free he feels or how empowered he feels. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe, and under other circumstances, I would say for sure that it would. I think now it's a little different. But again, but probably that's why he would he will decide to go for an election early. It is true that he'll be the first prime minister that has never had a seat. But we have two other examples. One, not a good one for the Liberals, is John Turner. I mean, he did have a seat, but it was a long time before, in the past, that he had a seat when he took over from Pierre Trudeau in '84. That didn't work out well for the Liberals at all. So maybe that's not the example Liberals want to see. But even like Brian Mulroney, I mean, he came in and got his by-election win in Nova Scotia in order to have a seat and therefore as leader of the opposition. But that was very quick, and then we're in an election soon afterwards, and then he became prime minister. So it's not like he had this long resume of being an MP or leader of the opposition, and he became prime minister, and arguably quite a successful one. So I don't think that's so important, and particularly now under the circumstances where basically people are going to judge him by how well he deals with the crisis we're in, and not whether he found a by-election somewhere to sit in.
All right, Justin Trudeau, how will he be remembered, do you think? I know that's a loaded big question, but just quickly, how do you think he'll be remembered?
Right now, people, I think, will be glad that he's gone. Ask me that question again in 5 years. I'll be willing to bet that sure. People have changed their mind. They tend to forget the bad and remember the good.
Don, always great. Always enjoy your insight. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you. You take care.
All right, take care. Don Desserud, UPEI political science professor. We'll talk with Mark Brewer about U.S. politics when we come back. All right, joining us is Mark Brewer, University of Maine political science professor. Mark Brewer, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
No, I was happy to be here, Todd.
All right, so U.S. President Donald Trump, Commerce Secretary, says sweeping tariffs on foreign goods will be worth it even if they push the American economy into recession. Howard Lutnick made that in his comments yesterday. And I can't imagine that really resonates all that well with Americans struggling.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, it is interesting. This, over the course of this week, we've seen the language change a little bit, starting with President Trump himself over the weekend, and then a series of other Trump administration officials who are now for the first time admitting, that a recession may come about as a result of Trump's tariff policies. But if it does, it's going to be worth it. And like you said, I can't imagine that all but the most ardent Trump supporters are going to find that those kind of statements reassuring.
Why is there this lack of motivation to push back against Trump on and now I get it that there's some Democrats that will do that, and of course there's media people that'll do that, but no real decision makers, no lawmakers certainly on the Republican side are willing to stand up to Trump and say, whoa, wait a minute here. Why does he have such a grip on the American Republicans and the electorate on that side of the aisle?
Well, I mean, I think he's demonstrated that if you're a Republican and you cross Trump, it more or less means your political career is over, right? I mean, very few of the Republicans who've crossed Trump have been able to survive, and the few that have been able to do so are now going about their business very quietly.
Wow. So what would have to happen in order for people to start standing up? Would our economic collapse? Is basically the economy the only barrier that would motivate people to finally stand up against some of these decisions?
Well, I think it's the economy, but also I think it's services that people get within their congressional districts and within the states for the Senate, right? I mean, one thing we know is that members of Congress desperately want to get reelected. And the way that they get reelected is keeping their constituents happy. Mm-hmm. So if we do get a recession and if, jobs continue to get cut in the federal bureaucracy, the latter of which almost seems to be a guarantee, right? Those jobs are going to keep getting cut. Members are going to go back to their districts, are going to go back to their states, and they're going to start running into angry crowds, which is already happening to some, right? And when that happens, that's when I think you'll see members start to change their tune a little bit. And if you put on top of that, the economic damage that would come about as a result of a recession, then I think you'll start to see more Republican members of Congress motivated to stand up to Trump. But until that happens, I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of pushback from within his own party.
It just amazes me how it's the polar opposites depending on what you listen to and what you watch. I mean, you could watch mainstream media, to use that term, whatever, or late night talk show hosts or whomever, and talking about Trump in the first 100 days as a complete disaster, and yet you switch over to Fox and some of these other talking heads on the right, they say that he's the most amazing president and this has been the most effective 100 days ever. How could both these worlds exist at the same time, Mark? I don't get it.
Well, I mean, increasingly in the United States, people, Americans consume media that presents them with information they already agree with, and so therefore they parrot that back. Mm-hmm. But eventually there is still reality out there. And the economy, I think, you're right to focus on that, because that's the kind of reality that causes people to stand up and take notice, even if the media that they consume is telling them things are great. Their pocketbooks can tell them when they're not.
Okay, this whole 51st state, I mean, Trump doubled down again on it yesterday with the NATO chief sitting right beside him in the Oval Office, NATO Secretary General, who said nothing about it. Nobody seems to internationally care that Trump is threatening the sovereignty of Canada, Greenland, and Panama. This is bizarre to me. Why is he serious? I guess that's the question. Because some people out there think that this is part of the deal and all that jazz, and he's not serious. I believe that he is serious. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure if I'd put all three of those entities in the same group. I think he's deadly serious on Panama, and I think he's serious on Greenland, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he's very serious on those two. With Canada, I would put that in a different category. I think that there's more of, kind of Trump trolling going on there than anything else. It doesn't mean that Trump wouldn't like to add Canada, I guess, but I think even Trump probably recognizes that that's, completely unrealistic in a way that, Greenland maybe isn't, and the Panama Canal maybe isn't. Mm-hmm. Then also I think there's a certain amount of deal making or deal positioning going on in Greenland and the Panama Canal, right? And you've already seen some movement in Panama. There have been a couple of brokerage houses that have been sold from a Chinese, or about to be sold from Chinese companies to U.S. investment firm. Lots of people think Trump wants mineral rights in Greenland. I don't know what the deal making element would be in Trump. Is he going to try and make a deal for Prince Edward Island? I don't know. Is he like Anne of Green Gables? I don't know what's going on there. I think it's more trolling than anything else.
I would think in neighboring states like you and Maine, this would be a lot more front and center. We hear about border towns, and again, Holton and Calais, and all these communities that are reeling and suffering economically because Canadians are just not going across the border. But I'm not sure how far south this permeates into the southern states. Does it kind of end in Maine and border states, and is that part of the challenge that it doesn't get enough oxygen outside of those communities?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I can tell you here in Maine, I mean, the relationship between Maine, the United States, and Canada is front and center right now. I mean, on the news, all we hear about is what's going to happen when these tariffs kick in, and are people going to come from Canada to vacation in the summer in Maine like they normally do. We know that, Justin Trudeau specifically mentioned Old Orchard Beach. Canadians aren't going to come. So in Maine, it's a huge issue, but my guess is if you go a little further south, go to Pennsylvania, sure. Right? It's probably not an issue there, not in the same way anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the about face of American foreign policy when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to defending sovereignty, I mean, this is a complete 180 from 10 years ago or whatever terminal. But the United States is considered the defenders of sovereignty and leaders of the free world. I don't think that terminology is applicable anymore. What are your thoughts?
No, it's hard to make that case, right? I mean, the United States, regardless of which party has controlled the presidency or which party has controlled Congress, since the end of World War II, the United States foreign policy program has been pretty consistent. And there's been a fairly large amount of bipartisan agreement on how things should be done, right? The saying that politics ends at the border, right? So on foreign policy, the United States has been remarkably unified, regardless of, you could have divergent presidents like Ronald Reagan or Barack Obama, but their foreign policy was more or less the same. That's not true with Trump. We saw that during the first term, but everybody, and I'll put myself in that category as well, thought he was going to be a one-term president. It was a blip, and once he was gone, things would go back to normal. Biden promised that. He more or less delivered on that. But what he didn't deliver on was making Trump a one-term president. And so now that Trump is back and he's unrestrained, he's pursuing the kind of changes that he maybe talked about in his first term, but he was largely blocked from. He's not blocked this time.
All right, there's conversation and there's fear that Trump might try and pull some type of political stunt to stay in power. I don't know what levers would have to be utilized or what the Constitution would allow for, but is that realistic that he may say, 4 years isn't enough for me, I'm going to stick around?
I don't think it's realistic. I mean, the Constitution's pretty explicit about that. Since the Constitution was amended post-FDR, that it's 2 terms. In order to be able to run for president, the condition is that you have to be able to serve in the office, and Trump, by the 22nd Amendment, I guess, would be barred from the office. There are some people saying, he could run for vice president and kind of govern from the shadows like Putin did in that one term. I don't think the Constitution allows that either, although there's a little more ambiguity on that. You can never say never, right? I mean, I suppose you could amend the Constitution. That would be the most straightforward and legal way to allow him to serve a 3rd term. That's virtually impossible to pass. I don't know what would happen if Trump were to declare a national state of emergency the day before he's supposed to leave office and then say, I'm not leaving because of the state of emergency. Yeah. At that point, everybody kind of look at each other and go, well, what do we do? So if he was going to pull a stunt like that, I would think that would be more the kind of stunt. And then I don't know what the reaction would be, to be honest with you.
The problem is you just never know with Trump, right? The volatility and the unpredictability, you just never know.
Nope, you can't rule anything out, which is bizarre.
Mark, always appreciate it. Thanks, my friend. We'll talk again soon.
All right, sounds good, Todd. Thanks.
All right, take care. Mark Brewer, University of Maine political science professor. Your call is 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Perhaps you've heard something that you'd like to weigh in on already in the show, or something else you've got in your mind. 902-405-6000. An open hour when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, it's time for your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Again, 902-405-6000. Canada's getting a new prime minister this morning. Mark Carney being sworn in Ottawa, of course, at Rideau Hall. The former central banker turned Liberal leader will also reveal his new cabinet. What are your thoughts on this? Is Carney the right person for the job? Why or why not? What about his experience as a central banker and an economist? Is that impressive to you? Do you think that that'll impress Donald Trump? Is he the right guy to face off against Donald Trump and to steer us through troubled economic times? Or is he more of the same? As he's been framed as carbon tax Carney, another rich elite, does being wealthy mean you're out of touch with the electorate? That's what the Conservatives are suggesting. He's a wealthy elite and not in touch. Or are career politicians like Pierre Poilievre perhaps out of touch with the real world? Pierre Poilievre, from what I understand, has never had a job outside of politics. If he has, it's not been a significant job. Maybe as a student or something, but perhaps he's out of touch. Has Mark Carney brought you back to the Liberal fold? What are your thoughts on the fact that we've got a new Prime Minister today here in Canada, although it'll be short-lived because an election is certainly on the horizon? Also, we talked with Mark Brewer about Donald Trump and his repeated, frequent voiced desire to acquire Canada, Greenland, and Panama. Made the comments again yesterday with the leader of NATO sitting next to him in the Oval Office. And what did the NATO Secretary General say or do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Similar to what the British Prime Minister did, nothing. Which affirms or confirms the reality that we are on our own in this country of Canada. The rest of the world isn't going to defend us in any way, shape, or form. We have to figure this out on our own. And perhaps this is a wake-up call that was a long time coming. And can we pivot? What are your thoughts on how we can survive this and this patriotic swell that is going on in Canada? Are you getting caught up in it? What are you doing to respond to this? Are you buying Canadian? Are you not traveling to the States? Are you avoiding American entertainment, whatever it might be? And are you concerned? Is there a concern here that there's an anti-U.S. sentiment? Because ironically, we're depending on the United States visitors in a big-time way to come here this summer. A story yesterday, of course, talking about tourism and the reliance on American travelers coming here to this part of the world in Canada. So while Canadians avoid the United States, we want them to come here because we need their money. 902-405-6000. What would you like to talk about today? Let's kick it off with Tim. Hello, Tim.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Very good. Listen, as it relates to U.S. travelers, if the dollar wasn't advantageous to them, they wouldn't be coming. The fact is, it is. I hope they enjoy their stay. Yes, we'll take their money and don't stay too long. But that being said, as it relates to Trump, it was embarrassing yesterday watching that interview. It just seems when people walk into the convicted felon's office, they get mesmerized and they lose any sort of fortitude that they have. And that's truly unfortunate. That gentleman yesterday should have known better, spoke up and said, right is right, wrong is wrong, and walked out with some pride. But unfortunately, he, like others, have chosen not to do that, because if they say anything that pisses that individual off, Trump will simply threaten to withdraw funding. And that's what they know. And it's totally unfortunate until the collective world says enough's enough, and I exclude China or Russia, of course. But, at some point, the rest of the world's going to have to wake up, because today it's Canada, tomorrow it may be other nations or countries, and it will. And I'm certainly proud to see what's happening within Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Do you think we can sustain this, Tim, this patriotism? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, 100%. There's not a doubt, and I say this, I don't think I can be any prouder seeing people from one end of this country to the other walking around with maple leaves, looking at labels in grocery stores. Yes, we can sustain it, and at some point, in my opinion, we will. We may have to go through some pain, but we'll be okay.
Okay, appreciate the call. Thank you. Take care. 902-405-6000. Hello, Chris.
Good morning, Todd. First thing I want to say is I didn't get a chance to get on yesterday, but I hope Jim's listening. And Jim, I think you owe Tony an apology. It was rude. It was very, let's call it what it is, un-Canadian, since everybody's been wrapping themselves around the flag now. Jim, it was very un-Canadian of you to say that to Tony. Tony, as far as I'm concerned, is a Canadian just as much as he is an American, maybe more so, because he's chosen to live here for the last 25 or so years, my understanding. And all he was doing was stating the obvious and underscoring the importance of voting, which we in Canada don't seem to realize or get a grasp on exactly how important that is. And that's all Tony was doing. Jim, you've drank the Liberal Kool-Aid. I know that. There's nothing we can do about it. But I really think you owe Tony an apology. The guy you had on this morning, Todd, about, I think, Frank Palermo?
Yep, Frank Palermo.
Boy, that guy's got good lungs. I didn't think he was ever going to come up for air.
I know. It's true.
A friend of mine said to me a little while ago, he said, we should get Todd a nice big box of chocolates or some kind of a sweet treat to to acknowledge how you have to put up with this stuff when you're interviewing. You probably had a bunch of questions you wanted to ask and never got a chance to ask.
Yeah, he definitely had a lot to say, that's for sure.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I don't know how we could do it. But anyway, look, I'm kind of saying this tongue-in-cheek right now, this next comment, but maybe what we should do here in Canada is start a campaign where we ask all of the American border states to join us. Throw it back in put the ball back in Trump's court, see how he likes it.
Yeah.
I mean, not that it would ever happen, but I think they certainly have a lot more to gain if they joined us than staying with the present situation in the States. I've talked to a lot of people about the tariffs and stuff. That's what we've all been talking about. And unfortunately, it's overshadowing stuff that's happening right in our own country now and within our city. Here it's HRM budget time and stuff like that, and no one's talking about it. Nobody is there's no oversight or anything, and it must be something the council really likes, because I mean, we're looking at another stiff increase in our property taxes, and nobody's talking about it. It doesn't seem like anybody's trying to do anything about it, and that. And I get it. The tariffs are a really big deal, and nationally and internationally, that's what people are talking about. But we really have to try and pay attention to our local situation as well. And I know it's very difficult because you get so many balls in the air, you can't juggle them all. There's no way. But we really can't sustain our Halifax regional municipality the way that it's set out now. We just can't do it. We're over-governed to begin with. We know that, provincially, federally, and municipally. But we can't keep taking these property tax increases. I mean, in the last 3 years, it amounts to about 21% increase in our property taxes. Has your household income increased by 21% or anywhere near it, Todd, in 3 years?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in that we don't talk enough about these issues, and it is because of what's going on in the United States. But I'm not sure, Chris, how to reverse that. This seems to be what people are interested in more than anything else, because this is an open forum, as you well know, and you raised, and I think you should raise the fact that we've got budget deliberations. But it astonishes me that we don't talk about it, and perhaps I share in the blame in that, I guess, but I'm just trying to gauge the interest of what people want to talk about, and it seems to me that tariffs and trump everything else.
That's what no pun intended, of course.
Yeah. Oh.
But you're absolutely right. I don't blame you for it or whatever. It's what people want to talk about. I mean, I talk about it. Almost everybody that calls you talks about it. It's the flavor of the month or the year or the day or whatever you want to call it. But I want people to look at Carney and look at the Liberals and see them for what they really are, for who they really are, not for who they tell you that they are. Watch what Carney's doing. He's surrounding himself with all the Trudeau confidants and all the people that supported Trudeau. Carney advised him and supported him. And as well, while he was chairman of Brookfield Asset Management, he was soliciting and getting contracts from the Liberal government while he was Trudeau's advisor. So, I mean, that's a conflict of interest big time, I think. And they talk about Pierre Poilievre as being Trump-like and so on. Well, did you hear what Trump said the other day? And I quote him, Poilievre is not mega enough. What does that tell you?
Well,
if Trump does not recognize mega in Poilievre, it's not there.
Well, I think that those people, Chris, that are convinced that Poilievre is too far to the right of the political spectrum already believe that and are entrenched in that, and that is also what his supporters want. So Poilievre's got a dance here that he has to orchestrate here, because his support in many ways, in some cases, like what Trump is doing in the United States. So he's got to be very careful how he orchestrates this whole thing.
Todd, you're absolutely right. And Jordan called yesterday, and most of the things that Jordan says, I'm not going to say I agree with, disagree with, or whatever, but he seems fairly well thought out in many cases. He seems like an intelligent guy and competent and that sort of thing. But how many times do you and Ian Lee and many people calling in your show have to explain tariffs to people? People listening out there, tariffs are a friggin' tax. That's all they are. They got a different name, but they're a tax. And when Jordan called saying, Trump is going to give the people a tax break that are affected by these tariffs, are we going to get a tax break here in Canada? No, we're not getting a tax break. We're getting a tax increase, people. Yeah. This is the tax you're going to pay on every good and service that comes in from the United States that has a tariff placed on it by our government, a retaliatory tariff. Yeah. You're going to pay it. It's a tax. And get a rebate or a refund or whatever. Carney and these guys are portraying this thing as though there's a silver lining into this dark cloud of tariffs. There isn't, Todd, in my opinion. And I don't think Ian Lee thinks there's any silver lining in it either.
No, he doesn't. Got a bogey. Thanks, Chris.
Todd, thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Todd. Hope I don't lose you here. First one's a comment, second one's a question. I think every municipal, provincial, and federal employee should get a maximum raise of the cost of living every year. I think this would help curb the huge increases that ministers and all those people get. And my question is, fuel, U.S., food, U.S., crew, U.S., ferry, U.S. I'm talking about the Yarmouth ferry.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen with that this year? I think Canadian about it is our taxpayers' money paying for it.
Yeah, that's a good question. How many people are going to want to get on the ferry to go to Bar Harbor? You're absolutely right. I think that's a valid question. And at some point, and at some point, we need to really take a hard look at it. The problem with it, Mark, is we've dumped so much money into it. How do you pull out from it now? That's the problem.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, is the contract not over in 2026?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but we've spent a ton of money in that ferry, into the infrastructure in Bar Harbor, and we got a lot of money sunk into it. So I'm not sure. It might be too big to fail at this point, Mark. That's the problem with it.
Well, that's what happens when you go and spend money in the States like that, when you're too stupid to know any better.
Yeah.
But if it was me this year, I know we owe them money regardless whether they run or not. But to keep our costs as low as possible, just shut it down for the summer.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, there you go, Mark. Thanks for the call. Good point.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Hello, Greg.
Hey, how you doing, Todd?
I'm well, you?
Good. Just wanted to comment about Wayne Gretzky. I mean, he's been taking it on the chin lately, by the way.
Yeah.
And there's some that are thinking that it's unwarranted. And I'm for one of them. It's unwarranted. He's been an exemplary Canadian. He's been arguably one of the finest hockey players that this country ever produced. He's always comported himself with class and everything. And just because they have a difference of opinion when it comes to political, there's people that want to throw him under the bus. And I think that's just wrong. Like Bobby Orr said, he said, hockey players, yes, they're there, but they also have opinions and political opinions like everybody else they do. But, I think what they're doing with Gretzky, I think that's just not right, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, here's the thing, Greg, and I tend to agree with what you're saying, but people are passionate about their sports, and he's an icon. He's a Canadian icon. He goes beyond icon. He's a legend and the best hockey player of all time. Is he entitled to his opinion? Absolutely. Should he be free to speak it? Absolutely. Yeah. But that said, people should also, conversely, have the right to criticize him, I think, and you got to have broad shoulders if you want to be in the public eye, and if you want to have. Look, if he has to know that he's going to get blowback from supporting Donald Trump, and I think that Canadians have every right to be ticked off them if they want to be.
Yeah, but again, it comes down to, like, you may have an opinion on a political, and but I'm not going to sit there. I may criticize you, but again, at the end of the day, that's your opinion, and you're entitled to it. And I just think that, they want to take away the street that they named after him in Edmonton and, get this guy. I mean, my oh my.
Well, I mean, there's a petition that has been floated around. I don't know that that'll ever happen, Greg. I guess no. I defer, Greg, to, if you're in the public eye and you benefit from being in the public eye the way that Wayne Gretzky has, and all the fame and all the notoriety, that if you're going to open your mouth and you're going to talk about politics and you're going to entrench yourself, especially in a time we're polarized the way we are today, that you got to expect blowback. I don't feel sorry for him, Greg. To be honest with you,
that's true. You're correct. That's a good point. But like I say, we got to get back to the thing that everybody's entitled to, and we're not all going to agree on opinions that we have.
No, that's true. That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Okay, Greg.
And there's going to be times when we're just going to see you later.
Okay, thanks, pal.
Anyway, have a good weekend.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
You too. Take care. I don't feel one bit bad for Wayne Gretzky, to be honest with you. Not even in the least. He rose to fame because of his skills and made millions and millions and millions of dollars, all kinds of notoriety and all the good that goes with it. If you're going to wade into political waters, then you are an orchestrator of your own problems, as far as I'm concerned. Hello, Chris.
Hello. I want to say something about the property taxes there.
Sure.
That Chris was talking about.
Yeah.
In my belief, the only way that that's going to change, because it is ridiculous, is that at least 75% of the population just got to be like, no, we're not paying it. That's the only, in my view, that's the only way it's going to happen. Like, just pay what we paid pre-COVID or, a couple, 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that ever going to happen?
Yeah. Well, you know the answer, Chris. That'll never happen, right?
Exactly. It'll never happen. 1, 2, 3 people doing it is just, okay, well, we're taking your house or however that works, right? I know they're not going to take your house, but
well,
anyway.
they certainly would if you didn't pay your taxes.
Well, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, you're going to get the time or whatever, be like, okay, dopey, pay your taxes, and that's that. But the only way to stop it, in my opinion, you could talk all day. Like, people talk and talk and talk, and it just, when it comes to money to the government, no. The only way to do it, my view, is to just, everybody's got to be like, nope, not doing it. Here's what you got last year, the year before, that's what you're getting. Yeah. Because you're right, household incomes haven't gone up that 20+%.
Absolutely not. And where will it end, Chris? Where will it end? It'll never end.
That's right, exactly. Unless the people stand up and say, nah, not happening.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the call, pal.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. A quick email from Ken, and then back to the phones. Ken says, how much of our money has HRM Council lost on EV buses with all the issues that the EV industry has been having lately? EV vehicle and battery plants having financial issue and perhaps closing, and on bike lanes that are hardly used, they must be held accountable. And one other quick email from Phil on the Wayne Gretzky issue says, I'm a huge Wayne Gretzky fan and probably even bigger than Bobby Orr. I think that people must remember that hockey is not a sport that everyone watches. I believe both should be open for criticism. This is about country first before individual accomplishments. I personally don't think that streets, land, lakes, or anything should be named after people. That comes from Phil. Thanks for sending it along. 902-405-6000. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Todd. I didn't think I was going to call today, but I got some news for you. Breaking news.
Okay, let's hear it.
Yesterday, I mentioned that I thought that Trump would move troops to the border at some point. I never said he was going to cross the border, but I said he'd move troops to the border, number one. Number two, keep in mind he already has people working on doing something with the border, realigning it in some way, shape, or form to satisfy whatever the hell he wants. But here's the news. Rhode Island Congressman Seth Magenzer submits a No Invading Act, seeks to prohibit funds for the armed forces to engage in operations to invade or seize territory from Canada, the Republic of Panama, and the self-governing territory of Greenland. So is it going to pass? Probably not. Mm-hmm. But you do have some interested Americans who are caring about our allies. The bill is all-inclusive, by the way. It says all allies. One last thing real quick now. I had a déjà vu moment not long ago watching TV, and I thought of 2015 when the now deposed Prime Minister, the first thing he did was take a trip to the Aga Khan's Island on the Aga Khan's dime. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I don't understand it, but I saw on CBC this morning on the ribbon that your soon-to-be or already new Prime Minister is going to England and France next week. That doesn't make sense to me, Todd. I think there's a problem going on here in Canada that, in my opinion, if I were a Canadian, I would say, well, what the hell is he doing that for? They don't have anything to do with us swirling down the toilet. Yeah. Why is he going over there? Well, I don't know, but that's what it says on what CBC News is reporting. Yep. Todd, have a great weekend.
Okay, pal. Okay, Tony, thanks so much. And yes, the tradition of jumping in the jet and jet setting around on our dime, well, looks like it's being passed on to Mark Carney. And look, would Poilian be doing the same thing? I would suggest likely so. 902-405-6000. Hello, Paulette.
Hi, there's a few questions I'd like to ask you, Todd. Good morning first.
Okay.
It's because you hear more than I do. Okay, I thought I heard on the news that American businesses are buying up Panama, some of Panama's businesses, and I thought I heard on news this morning Trump is asking for permission for the Army to go in and take over the Panama Canal. Now, I'm not sure on this, but I think that's what I heard. And also, why is the U.S. making icebreakers? And then the other night, I got up to the morning, and I heard a woman from Greenland say on the news there is a lot of activity going on up north. And so why can't the world get together and cut Trump completely out. I know that sounds mean, but cut them completely out and do business with each other. And instead of upping the turf so bad, just do a 10% turf if they're going to do a 10% turf with each other and the rest of the world. I don't know, but maybe you can answer all these questions.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add, Paulette. As far as what's going on with Donald Trump and what's the very latest, I've given up on trying to keep up with it because it changes every minute. Who knows what's going on, Paulette? I don't really have anything else to add, but thanks for the call, okay? Appreciate it. Take care at 902-405-6000. Alexis, hello.
Oh, hello.
Hi there.
I'm sorry, I'll get you off speaker. Sorry
Sure.
about that.
Yeah, no problem.
So, Todd, I'm a first-time caller, so I'm a little bit nervous.
Oh, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I just want to, what did we do before free trade?
What did we do before free trade?
Yeah, like with everything that's going on, and I'm as immersed in all of this as a lot of Canadians.
Yeah.
But I mean, we made it. We certainly did not have the money, and we didn't live, I don't think, as well before free trade as we do today. But all of this, we're going to go under, and I don't believe that. Mm-hmm. And I think that we should all just stick together and keep doing what we're doing. That's number one. I listened to David Rosenberg on BNN last night, and I completely agree with his point of view. I believe that we should not be doing retaliatory tariffs. Mm-hmm. I believe that we should be charging an import tax, an export ban if we have to. Okay, if the Americans won't pay the money, it's an export ban, and cut taxes in Canada. So, and if the press secretary, I forget her name, but she's, I recently heard her saying it's egregious for charging a surtax on electricity that Doug Ford did. Mm-hmm. So my opinion is that we should not communicate with America at all. Keep them guessing, silence, unless, they're ready to negotiate. Stop all this running to the White House and trying to make a deal. You can't barter with a psychopath. Mm. And so my opinion is every time we're insulted, which is on a daily basis these days, we don't respond at all. All that we do when they say that it's egregious and America feels insulted, we just continue sending them the same videos that we hear every single day.
Yeah, Alexis, listen, you make a valid point in that we the media play a role in this, and people on social media, because we constantly, every time Trump says it, we disseminate it, we broadcast it, we send it out every day. And why do we do that? I don't know. Like maybe we should just start ignoring them. I don't know, Alexis. It's tough.
Yeah.
Because by the same token, everybody's talking about this and everybody's interested in it. So it's
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm interested, and I'm still going to listen on the news every day. It's very interesting to me. But no more stupid games with this guy. Yeah. He's not going to, he's a sick man. We know that. You can tell that he's a sick man. And
what do you mean sick? Sick in what way? I don't know what you mean by that.
He's mentally unwell. I think.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that, Alexis. In all fairness, I'm not comfortable with people diagnosing people's mental health on the air because we don't know. I appreciate your opinion. I don't mean to shut you down on that, but I think that he's got it. I don't think he's got cognitive issues. I think he's just a sociopath, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, I do too. So sociopath, psychopath, I do too. So my opinion about what did we do before free trade, I think as Canadians, if we just hunker down, we're going to hurt. We absolutely know that. But in the meantime, just stay quiet. Start trying to develop new trade ties with the EU and other countries around the world. And we're going to suffer silently, look for new trade partners. And also, I'm not really privy to all of the pros and cons of this pipeline east, but I think it's absolutely imperative that that happens at some point. If it takes 10 years, whatever it takes, but we have to get away from the U.S. being our main partner and our friend, because they're not.
Okay, thanks for calling. Call again, please.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
take
you.
care. It's a good question. What did we do before free trade? But we had a different demographic of our country. And the manufacturing capability that we had in this country after the war, like in the United States, after the Second World War, is we built up a strong manufacturing base. And we had the baby boomers, and the demographics were completely different. So it's difficult now to pivot, and the economy of scale, the amount of people that you have as customers, in order to warrant that type of manufacturing, is not there in Canada. This is the challenge that we have. This is why energy and minerals and natural resources are perhaps our go-to, because that's going to be the quickest and the easiest. Easy might not be the right term, but certainly the quickest way to pivot on all of this, because building up a manufacturing base is not realistic, because we don't have the population base to warrant it. And in the United States, look, what's going to stop all of this? It's going to have to be the economy is going to have to completely run into the ground, run ashore. That's what's going to have to happen before Trump will ever move on this. And I'm talking a massive crash, so that the Americans just will not put up with it anymore, and the electorate changes its tone. That's what's got to happen. Nothing else will stop Trump and these tariffs. Nothing else, in my humble opinion. 902-405-6000. Heather, hello.
Tone. That's what's going to happen.
Hi, Heather.
Nothing else will stop Trump.
Heather,
nothing else.
She's going to...
In my humble opinion. 902-405-6000.
All right, I'll put her on hold. Heather, try and listen on the phone and not on the radio, because there's a delay, okay? I'll come to you after this call. 902-405-6000. Gary, hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi there.
The thing about the Yarmouth Ferry, I never ever agreed with it in the first place. Bamboo, she always tried to refer to as an extension of a highway. Well, if it's not like the Confederation Bridge going from province to province, or even the PEI ferry going from province to province. We're going from Canada to the U.S., and it doesn't carry trucks. That's the other thing about the cap. So if it was truly a highway, you would have all kinds of transportation going there. The other thing about the Yarmouth Ferry is that I believe Nova Scotia paid construction on the American side for...
absolutely, we did, yep.
Terminal.
Yep.
And who's looking after that maintenance for that? The other thing is the border guards. We also, I think that in that same agreement, we're paying the salaries for those border guards. That has to stop if that's true. I'm not 100% on that one, but it seems to me that that's part of the agreement, that we pay for the border guards as well. So when it comes to guarding the borders, it seems to me we're doing more than what we should. I mean, we have guns coming across from one side, from the American side to Canada, and more than the fentanyl is going across to the Americans. Trump is right out to lunch, and I don't like to diagnose people either, but I did read some kind of reports where people that are in the early stages of mental decline, they start to repeat things over and over again. And he seems to do that a lot.
Yeah.
That's just my observation.
Okay, Gary.
Anyway.
Okay, thanks for the call, pal. Appreciate it. Take care.
care.
All right, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Bill's the first-time caller. Hello, Bill.
Good day, sir.
Hi
Thanks
there.
for taking my call.
Sure.
Just two comments. One is I agree with people who are saying that Trump has wakened us up. The second thing I wanted to comment, sir, is everybody talks about boycotting American products and so on. And what I wonder is why nobody's mentioned Uber. The money goes directly right to the States. It's a big deal, and nobody's mentioning it.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that it's a U.S. company, Bill, so it's an interesting point. Thanks for calling, though. Call again, pal.
But Again, sir, thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely. Take care. 902-405-6000. Let's try Heather again. Hello, Heather.
Hi, how you doing, Todd?
I'm well. There you go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I've got 3 points to make. The first point I want to make is about how governments at the federal, provincial, and municipal level are actually economic drivers. And what I'm going to talk about there is that if you look at jobs, okay, you got people talking about federal swollen big-time jobs, et cetera. We have to remember that there was an increase in jobs because of CERB, and then that increase stayed there because the Canadians demanded accountability. Okay, so that was all at the request of the Canadian people.
I don't know what do you mean there was an increase in jobs because of CERB? I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, because in order to give out CERB and to see whether or not Canadians and businesses qualified for CERB, there had to be an increase in the federal public workforce in order to vet those applications.
Well, they didn't do much of a job vetting them, but anyway, yes, it seems to me now that you mentioned that, I remember CRA had to hire more people, yes.
Yes, and then the accountability factor. Canadians were demanding that there was accountability for people who received CERB in terms of was it justified or wasn't it, because as you said, perhaps the vetting was a little bit lax when they began.
It was not perhaps, it was very lax.
Okay, so what happens is that you've got, we are a semi-socialist, if you will, capitalist country, you've got three choices here. You've got the feds, you've got people getting a paycheck from government levels, or you have them moving to EI because we're downsizing, and after that you may have them moving to welfare. So at what point do people understand that the tax base is still supporting a large contingent of Canadians? That's point number one. Okay, so you're just moving it along. The next thing is that the aid for trade. I don't know if people understand the aid for trade concept. So let's take the Ukraine for an example, and let's take the U.S. aid. So what happened is that the U.S. had an opportunity to empty their warehouses full of military equipment that was aging. And that money went to the U.S. manufacturers of military equipment. And now that their warehouses are semi-empty, they now will have more research and development in putting more money into new military-type equipment. So it's not that bundles of cash went into the hands of Zelensky. It was aid for trade kind of thing, and it was a donation, okay? So that's it. Now, the other thing, and the last point I want to make, Todd, is, are you aware of a British comedy called Dad's Army?
I am not.
You are not? Okay. Well, it was during the World War II, and it was the British who had, like My Dad's Army, the people who couldn't go and physically fight, the older group, patrolling the shores and doing all types of volunteer work to make sure that the UK was, secure against the Germans, right? And I think it might be time for Canada to think about establishing a database of people of a retired workforce who are still able-bodied and have considerable skills in order to say, we need to perhaps know whether you're out there as supply techs or managers or different types of, I have emergency management skills where I'm a retired diplomat and my husband's retired IT. Maybe it's time to start thinking about that.
Okay, Heather, appreciate your comments. Thanks for the call.
Okay, bye.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Margaret, hello.
Good morning, and how are you this morning?
I'm well, you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm calling to support the chap that was speaking of, I guess three of your clients that called in about the taxes, property tax. And I agree 100% with him. Pay what you always paid. And the addition, forget about it. Because Tim Houston is controlling all the taxpayers' money. We have no control whatsoever on it, which I think is totally wrong. Whatever he puts in position, he continues to go ahead and do it, which another thing is wrong. Now, I don't know what support you're going to give back to me on this, but, taxpayers are the ones that run the country, not Tim Houston and all the other support people that we put in power.
Well, I would say that Tim Houston and politicians are the ones that run the country, and we're the ones that pay for it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
So how do you run the country without the taxpayers?
Well, that's it. That's it. That's a good question.
How do you do that?
And look, I hear you. I hear your frustration, Margaret. But I would suggest that not paying your property tax is probably not a good idea because you're going to end up having your house repoed.
You know what? I think it's a great idea because you know what? Maybe that might show them that we have a little bit of power and go ahead and do what we want to do instead of he does what he wants to do running our country.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate the call. David. Hi, David.
Good morning, Todd. Very quickly, we got Wayne Gretzky, Gordie Howe, and who's coming up next? Alex Ovechkin. He only needs about 9 more goals, and he's topped Wayne Gretzky's record now. Will he be affected by with all that's going on, or will he be respected?
I don't really know, David. I look. It's hard. That's a good question. It's an amazing feat, nonetheless. That the record, his points record, will never be touched because of his assists are astronomical. But
it might be. He's on.
David. To be honest with you, listen. I'm going to let you go. Thanks, pal. Thanks for raising. Raising the issue. To be honest with you, I think that with all the challenges that we're dealing with societally now and globally, I think that fewer and fewer as the weeks and months go on, there are fewer and fewer people who give a rat's you know what about any of this stuff when it comes to sports and entertainment. I mean that. Look, I still have an interest, and I get it. There's a lot of sports fans out there, and people are fanatical about sports. I understand that, but I do believe that as we are more and more pressed with issues, that sports becomes less and less important all the time. And not to dissuade or discredit it or anything, it's just my opinion. It's just my opinion, folks, as I always say. I don't really care, to be honest with you, if Alex Ovechkin breaks Wayne Gretzky's record or not. I really don't care. And I don't really care what Wayne Gretzky has to say about Canada either, to be honest with you, and or Donald Trump. I don't really care. But I do believe that he has the right to his opinion, and conversely, I think that we have the right, or people have the right, to care and to criticize him for voicing those concerns. But look, I just think that sports is a distraction, and it's not much more than that. And I just think that people are already distracted enough with all types of other issues right now. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. We'll open the phone lines again on Monday from 11 until 12. Groups call for civilian crisis response when it comes to mental health calls. That when we come back. Right, this story recently in the Chronicle Herald. The recent deaths of 2 men experiencing a mental health crisis have prompted several advocacy groups to call for an update from government on proposed civilian crisis response teams. Joining us to discuss all of this is Dr. Jamie Livingston, Associate Professor, Department of Criminology at St. Mary's University. Jamie, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, of course.
Hi, Todd.
All right, so tell us about what these response teams look like. What in an optimal world, what would it look like?
In a nutshell, they are civilian service providers that aren't armed and are highly trained to support people who are in mental health crises. These teams now exist in over 200 communities across North America, including several big urban centers in Canada like Toronto and Ontario and Victoria, BC. And largely they're comprised of harm reduction workers, peer support workers, and people with clinical backgrounds like social workers and nurses and such. So they are prepared and trained to respond to people and to support their needs during the crisis, and then to follow up with them after the immediate crisis has been resolved.
All right, I think it needs to be mentioned, or that the police responding, I think, almost always do their best, right? I don't think we want to villainize police, and I'm not suggesting that you are at all. But I think it's important that we don't villainize police for doing a tough job in the circumstances that they're dealing with here. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. The problem is that If somebody has a broken leg or suffers a heart attack or a stroke, paramedics are usually dispatched to attend to those physical health emergencies. However, if somebody has a mental health emergency, here in Nova Scotia, the police are dispatched. And that's a discriminatory system, and one that is not very effective for people who are experiencing a mental health crisis. In some cases, it can quickly escalate, just the fact that the police are responding. It's also very costly. The police have very few techniques or capabilities to resolve a crisis other than transporting someone to hospital, which is a very costly way to manage people in the community. And it's also a really major barrier to people calling for help. So if someone's in crisis or they have a loved one who's in crisis, there's a lot of unwillingness to call for help if police may be involved. So there's a whole range of issues that arise when we center police rather than civilians in responding to people who are just struggling. They're having difficulty coping, and they just need some extra support. And these are usually situations that have no public safety risk. So most mental health crisis calls don't involve imminent risk to others, weapons, criminal activity. And so there's no reasonable grounds for police to be involved. So that's what we're kind of calling for, is for those situations, it makes most sense to send people who are unarmed and are capable of attending to people's needs without the stigmatizing and criminalizing element that goes along with a police-centered crisis response system.
Okay, from a safety standpoint, what if things do go awry or somebody does get violent or whatever it might be? Would the civilian response team be capable of responding to that, or what then would be a possible ramification?
Yeah, I mean, we don't send paramedics to unsafe situations, and at the same time, we wouldn't send civilian crisis responders to unsafe situations as well. So when somebody calls for help, either for themselves or someone else, there would be over the phone a risk assessment screen to determine if there's an imminent and serious public safety risk, are there weapons involved, is there a medical emergency, and so there would be categories that would screen out a civilian crisis response team, or at least have them attending with police presence or police available for backup. So, as I mentioned, these programs exist in many communities. Toronto is one of the most prominent examples that have established a civilian response team in Toronto. So they created a fourth emergency branch. So in addition to having firefighters, paramedics, police, they now have a community response to attending to people in crisis. And they've arranged, Denelv is arranging to safely send community responders to situations. And if things do get out of hand in those rare instances, then there has been already agreements and processes in place where police are available to assist the team.
All right, so there would be circumstances, though, in which this could not be anticipated. A phone call would not anticipate the level of danger. Or do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree, but I think the focus in most cases should be the person in crisis, who is usually the person who's at most risk during these calls. So their safety should be prioritized. And, there's kind of the reason that we have a police-based system is because there's this idea that these calls always involve violence and danger and risk to others, when that simply isn't the case. That's the exception rather than the rule. As I mentioned, in most cases, it's just somebody having difficulty coping in the community. Maybe they're struggling with thoughts of suicide, or just needs an extra hand to support them. And programs that exist in communities elsewhere, including one in Eugene, Oregon, that's existed for 30 years, have shown very little sort of in terms of negative outcomes for crisis responders responding to situations and it ending in harm to the first responders. So there is good evidence that the worst case scenario rarely happens when you put in place sufficient processes to first screen the calls and then scenarios to fall back on should the first responders need that.
What type of skill set would the response team have? Are you talking about people with a degree in psychology, psychiatry? What type of skill set would be ideal?
There's different models. And so you could have purely clinicians responding to these calls. So these would be people who have degrees in social work, nursing, and are mental health professional service providers. Most models nowadays, including in Toronto and in Ottawa, use more of a blended approach. So they have professionals with degrees and clinical experience, but they also have folks with lived experience. And are already providing services in our communities and harm reduction organizations and in community-based mental health organizations. And so the blended approach is kind of preferred because many people who have lived experience that can provide peer support can quickly develop relationships with people in the community, which is really, really important in these types of crisis situations. The fact that someone can come to a situation without a power imbalance and instantaneously build a relationship with another person, that automatically diffuses the situation and it can provide that space where someone can provide support and care for the other person. So it's sort of a blend of professionals, many of whom are already working in our communities that already provide this type of trauma-informed, compassionate type of person-centered care. And that's primarily what these programs look like.
What are the main reasons do you think that we are not heading in this direction?
Well, I think we are heading in this direction.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Why do you think we haven't done this yet? How's that sound?
That sounds better.
Yeah.
Well, it takes resources to switch a model. So right now we have police responding to the substantial proportion of crisis calls. And that's a model that it takes time and energy and resources to move away from. So you need to invest in building a new model and training new teams and changing the ways that communities think about mental health crises and who should be responding to these situations. So I think money is one thing. The other thing is the stigma of mental health issues has been reduced recently. However, there's still kind of the residuals of this belief that people with mental health issues, including people experiencing a mental health crisis, are dangerous and that police are required in these situations. And I think it's going to take some work to overcome that. The fact that when you look at these calls, that's not the case. And in fact, one of the triggers for people, the situations escalating, is in fact the police presence and people not wanting that when they're at their most vulnerable state in their lives. So I think there's an attitudinal component, and there's also sort of a resource component as to why we're not moving more quickly and why it's taken so much time to move in the right direction.
So what type of time, if we were to project out 5 years from now or so, do you think that this will happen? Will this come to fruition here in HRM?
Yeah, so in HRM specifically, there's already action to implement a civilian crisis team this year. I believe it's this year. So the HRM Public Safety Office has been working to develop models, develop processes, identify service providers so they can launch a civilian crisis response team here in HRM. So I believe that will definitely happen within the next year or two. And then we have another group in Windsor, Nova Scotia, that is developing a similar model for West Hants. So instead of the RCMP being the default first responders to mental health crisis situations, they'll send a civilian team of very capable and trained people who can go support someone in the community. And ideally, we would see this in every community, that somebody has an option other than the police to call for wellness checks, as well as different types of crisis situations.
Dr. Livingston, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Good chat.
Okay. Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Dr. Jamie Livingston, Associate Professor, Department of Criminology at St. Mary's University. We'll be right back. All right, this story recently on the Global News website. Topics of death and grief can be hard to broach, but the founders of a Nova Scotia library hope to help people navigate difficult emotions surrounding loss through books. Joining me to discuss all of this is Terri Milton, a librarian. And Terri, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks so much for the invitation, Todd.
Indeed. So what part of we're talking about Coldbrook, part of the that's the part of the province that your library is at, correct?
Yeah, that's where the library is situated. The library is a project of the Valley Hospice Foundation, and the hospice building sits in Kentville. We are nearby in Coldbrook, and that's where we administer the grief library from.
All right, tell us more about this.
Sure. So as I said, it's a project of the Valley Hospice Foundation, and the original concept came about back in October of 2023 when two of the staff of the hospice went to a palliative care conference. And they came back from the conference with the idea of a grief library as a way to further conversations in the community about grief and loss and bereavement. And I was sitting on the board of the Hospice Foundation at the time, and I'm a librarian with lots of experience. So I put my hand up and volunteered to be the librarian for this project. So we started from there and had our official launch last fall. Mm-hmm. And here we are today with a pretty robust grief library collection that sits in Coldbrook. But we also mail those books out to anyone in Nova Scotia. So all you need is a mailing address, and we will send materials out at no cost to you.
Yeah, I would think that, unfortunately, there's always going to be a need, right?
Yeah, because you know what? It's sort of the price of being human, Todd.
Yeah,
we all have grief and loss, and we focused initially on sort of the loss that comes with a death in the family or a friend, and then quickly realized that grief takes many other forms. So there are all kinds of life events that can give us a sense of loss and grief. So couples that struggle with pregnancy loss or infertility would be an example. Mm-hmm. People who have a critical illness or are facing a difficult diagnosis can have what's called anticipatory grief. So there's a whole lot of different forms. And another example is job loss and needing to move. So we are trying to encourage sort of reading and talking and learning about grief in all of those different forms.
All right, tell us what the reception has been.
The reception has been really gratifying. We have heard from practitioners in the hospice and palliative care realm who have said this has just been the best news that they've had in a long while. We have had great response even internationally. We were lucky enough to go to a palliative care conference at McGill in last October of 2024, where we won a prize for this project, and that was adjudicated by an international panel of palliative care practitioners and the audience in the room. And it really caught people's imagination, and we were asked by people from many other countries to help them replicate and scale our project for their needs. So that response has been really gratifying, and winning that prize has brought media attention here in Nova Scotia, which is really important because it helps us amplify our message for everyone in Nova Scotia who might be just feeling isolated with a particular form of grief that they are dealing with, and we want them to know that we're here to try and help.
Right, 350 books. How do you curate the books? How do you know what's going to work or what's applicable?
Yeah, when we initially started the Grief Library, we convened a working group of people who work in hospice and palliative care, who are also grief counselors, and we reached out to our contacts in multiple faith communities to make sure that we were hitting multiple faiths, multiple cultural perspectives. So we've kind of built the collection from there, and I use my skills as a librarian to then seek out additional titles and curate those, again, with trying to be sensitive to all the various forms of grief and all of the different sort of cultural perspectives that we bring into that. We always welcome suggestions from the community, too. So the more we sort of share the word, the more we hear back from people about a book that was particularly helpful to them. So that's been also really helpful.
Must be rewarding, I would think.
It's incredibly rewarding. Yeah. So we have about 320 books in our collection. We have 40 registered borrowers already. We only officially launched in September of 2024 with an amazing conversation we had with Sherry Fitch, by the way, which is worth a look. We've loaned out 234 different items across 8 counties of the province already. So Annapolis, Cape Breton, Colchester, Guysborough, Hants, Halifax, Kings, Richmond counties. And it's books and kit and picture books and audiobooks, even playaway books. And you know what, Todd, when I get those parcels back from people, they return them in Canada Post, there's almost always a thank you note. And for me personally as a librarian, it's some of the most rewarding work that I've done is volunteering on this project. And it's because we know we are reaching people and having an impact.
Terri, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for doing this, and thanks for your good work here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again. And I encourage people to look for us online. Just look for valleyhospice.ca/library and have a great day.
Okay, thanks, Terri. Appreciate it. Take care.
Take care.
All right, that's Terri Milton, librarian with Coldbrook, again, the Grief Library, and absolutely a good cause. When we come back, we're going to do a few things in the next half hour. We're going to talk with weather with Allister. We're going to talk with Gareth McDonald, the voice of the Mooseheads, and sports with Cecil as well. All that coming up. We'll be back.
Thanks.
All right, it is that time of the week. Time to talk weather with our weather specialist, Allister Aalders. Allister, hello.
Hello. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. It looks like the weekend's going to be dynamite. You bring some good news with you?
Yeah, some at least spring-like temperatures, double digits for much of HRM this weekend. I mean, it does come with a bit of a cost, mainly later in the weekend with quite a cloudy Sunday, fog, and a chance of drizzle. And then Monday is quite cloudy with a chance of showers, and then some rain Monday night and Tuesday. But for the start of the weekend, sun and clouds Saturday. And yeah, we're talking temperatures in the low teens for much of HRM. We are back at that time of year that when the wind blows in off the Atlantic, the coast is cooler. So while it might be, 10 or 11 tomorrow for much of HRM right along the coast, it's going to be, closer to 6 or 7. Yeah. So, take that in mind if you're planning a Saturday drive to Peggy's Cove or somewhere along the coast. But yeah, much of HRM getting into some spring-like double digits this weekend. And, we'll hope it continues for the rest of the month because we've got off pretty well so far weather-wise.
Absolutely. Winds, when the wind blows from the south, though, that's a pretty good indication that the weather's going to be nice, right?
Just depends on, I guess, the type of... it just depends, I would say. Southerly wind obviously comes with warmer, usually, warmer temperatures. It can be a signal that we have more of a rainy type of system on the horizon. In this case, we're getting that southerly pressure gradient before we get any widespread rain. Typically, a southerly flow, though, can signal that there's nice weather.
I guess what I meant is the temperature is going to probably be warmer than a north wind.
Yeah, a southerly wind is generally going to be warmer than a northerly wind. That's for sure. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, as far as astronomical celestial events, we had one this week.
Yes, we had the total lunar eclipse last night. If anyone was out at 3-4 o'clock this morning, they might be a little tired today. And
did you stay up for it? Or?
I'll be honest, I didn't. I caught a total lunar eclipse few years ago, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
So I decided to sit this one out, but the weather was pretty much perfect for most of the region. We had clear skies, and I've received some great photos on social media from people who did stay up. They said it was cold. It was down, -5, -6 overnight. So it was cold. But I think, when it comes to events like these that, don't happen all the time, it's often worth it to stay up and see.
Indeed. It's something in the news cycle today or this week. U.S. Weather Agency cuts will be felt in Canada, especially in hurricane season. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so obviously stateside, the current U.S. administration has been making cuts to various governmental departments, and that has included NOAA, which is the Oceanic Administration, and there's various sectors to NOAA in the States, including the Environment Canada equivalent stateside, which is the National Weather Service. So it's raising some concerns for various reasons. I would say for people living in the States, cuts to staff means less eyes on, weather forecasting or severe weather outbreaks. This is, we're heading into tornado season for a good chunk of the United States. Hurricane season will be coming up. So when you have, less eyes on that, things can, get missed or don't get communicated as fast as they should. There's obviously the sector when it comes to communicating with Canada in terms of hurricane season. We have a Canadian Hurricane Center based here in Dartmouth, but they have a heavy collaboration with the National Hurricane Center and NOAA stateside. And obviously with fewer eyes possibly on models or fewer people available to maybe, fly into a hurricane or collect data on hurricanes or maybe even communicate with our Canadian counterparts. There's some challenges that could arise there. I would say a big possible challenge will be the data aspect, especially with the National Weather Service launching weather balloons. There's already been 2 offices stateside that have announced, they will only be launching balloons when they can. And it's the balloon data is really critical to weather forecasting because we need that analysis from the surface right to the upper levels to assess what's happening, and the models need that data to tell you what's going on. So that's a big concern. I think the loss of data for our weather models. Obviously, we get it from various sources, satellites and airplanes and cargo ships and whatnot, but obviously there is a big concern in terms of, a loss of data for weather models to be able to accurately predict the weather.
Indeed. Okay. All right, so just before we let you go, another recap of the weather for the weekend and then into early next week.
Yeah, so double digits for much of HRM this weekend into next week. Cooler right along the Atlantic coast. Saturday, the pick. Some morning fog, but sun and cloud. Near 10 degrees inland, closer to 6-7 on the coast. Quite a cloudy day Saturday with fog patches, chance of drizzle, but temperatures inland will be in the teens. And then for Monday, greater chance of showers and drizzle, and then rain Monday night and Tuesday.
Okay, thanks, Al. Appreciate it, bud. Take care. That's Allister Aalders, our weather specialist. When we come back, chat with Gareth McDonald, voice of the Mooseheads and Sports with Cecil. We'll be back. All right, Gareth McDonald joins us. You all know Gareth McDonald, of course, voice of the Mooseheads here on our radio station. Gareth, thanks for joining us. Nice to see you, pal.
It's great to see you. How are you, Todd?
I'm doing well. So we've got the Mooseheads 2 weekends left, but it's kind of crunch time right now. I mean, you want to get some breathing room here to make the playoffs, right? Set the table. Where are the Mooseheads as far as the standings go?
Yeah, so, I mean, right now, I think they've got, 45 points. So they would have the second last spot here in the playoffs, basically meaning with the way things were kind of reconfigured probably about 7 years ago with the playoff structure, they would slide over to the Western Conference right now for the start of the postseason. I mean, way back in the day, we used to see it didn't matter what conference you were in. It was, kind of a 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15 type situation. But a few years ago, they were looking for, more of the rivalries in the postseason. They wanted more regional battles. So they kind of went to, a 1 versus 8 type thing in the East and in the West. But In the West, there are only 8 teams. And so basically right now, I think the Mooseheads, they got the second last spot in the Eastern Conference. They would slide over if the playoffs were to start today. They would take on, I think, the Rouyn-Noranda Huskies in the first round of the postseason. But again, that playoff berth right now, it's kind of far from solidified because they still have, they've got 4 games left. The St. John Sea Dogs have got 4 games left. St. John right now, I think they're just 3 points back of the Mooseheads. They've got some tough matchups coming up. No easy points for them, but no easy points for the Moose either. They got the same list of opponents: the Moncton Wildcats, the Cape Breton Eagles, and the Charlottetown Islanders. So the Moose will have a similar schedule here coming down the stretch to the Sea Dogs, and really no easy points for either side. But again, not a big buffer right now. So big points tonight on the line in Sydney.
All right, now I don't think that there's any illusions of grandeur here that the team's going to go all the way, but it's still important to get a playoff experience, right? This is important for the team, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, no doubt about it. It's this is a very young group. I think coming into the year, there were not a lot of lofty expectations for this team, as you said. The last couple of years were really go for it years for the Mooseheads. They had that great run back in 2023. Last year, it was a bit of a different story. It was a disappointing 4-game sweep in the first round of Bathurst. But yeah, I mean, coming into this season, this current roster, it was one. I mean, you look at it on paper, you can identify, if you follow junior hockey, you know where the Mooseheads are in the junior hockey cycle. This is the early stages of a rebuild. But at the same time, this team began the year with 3 pretty highly touted 16-year-olds in Danny Walters, Kalen Blake, and Emilio Santini. And I mean, since Christmas, 2 more added in netminder Nick Circa and Will Bent, who both joined the Mooseheads from prep schools in the U.S. here for the second half of the year. So with this young core, this Mooseheads roster, youngest in the queue in 50 years, the one they've got right now. Wow. Very young group. Yeah. But again, this is a group that's going to grow together. They're hoping that this team develops together, and playoff experience would be huge. I mean, I always look back to the great run that we mentioned earlier, the run they had all the way to the final back in 2023. I think you could probably make a direct correlation between that run and some of the playoff success they had the previous year in 2022. That was still one of those pandemic seasons, but they had a great first round against the Acadie Bathurst Titan, pushed the Bathurst Titan to a 5th and deciding game that was a shortened first round series. Yeah. It was just a best of 5, but some great experience, some pretty invaluable experience gained in that one. So yeah, I mean, for a young team right now, playoff experience would be huge.
Who right now are they lined up to play as if the season were to end today?
Yeah, I think again, I haven't checked it this morning, but it's pretty tight over in that Western Conference. Yeah. But again, I think last I looked, it was the Rouyn-Noranda Huskies, and the previous couple of weeks it was the Blainville-Boisbriand Armada, who have been one of the really good stories here in the second half. They've been piling up a lot of points. I think heading into last weekend, they hadn't lost a game in regulation in 14. They've been really good, but kind of like the Mooseheads as well. A younger roster. They don't have a ton of playoff experience, so that wouldn't be a bad matchup for the Moose.
A potential upset, perhaps?
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah, I mean, I think the Mooseheads, regardless of who they play, they're going to be a big-time underdog in any series in the playoffs. But, look at the goaltending they've got at times this year. Sure. I mean, they had great goaltending in the first half. That's been a big part of the reason that they were able to hang around a lot of games. They got that goaltending from Mathis Rousseau, who, of course, went to Moncton in the trade that brought Jacob Steinman back the other way. And, I mean, you look at Jacob Steinman's numbers since arriving with the Mooseheads, even better with Halifax than they were with the top team in the country in the Moncton Wildcats. So he's the kind of guy that he could steal you a few games there in the playoffs. I wouldn't want to go up against him in the first round. So yeah, I mean we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I mean I don't think there's anyone that follows the Q too closely that would be picking the Mooseheads.
But that's the beauty of junior hockey, right?
Well, yeah, no, for sure. Again, it will be a tough first round playoff opponent, whoever they get. But yeah, I mean, anything can happen in the playoffs. And I mean, I guess what I will say is this this Mooseheads team, that they've had some difficulty scoring goals this year. I think that, heading into these last couple of weeks, this is the lowest scoring team. They got the fewest goals for in Mooseheads franchise history. But at the same time, there really haven't been a lot of blowouts either, which sometimes you see from some young teams. I know that, again, we talked about the 2023 run. That previous year in 2022, they had a lot of games there coming down the stretch where they were blown out, and we haven't seen that this season. So this team is used to playing in some of those tight games, and that's all valuable for sure. It's kind of been a playoff type brand of hockey they've been playing all year.
Okay, remind people when you're on the air with the call.
Yeah, we got a call tonight, 7 p.m. puck drop. This will be the first of 2 games here this weekend against the Eagles. These two teams face off again. Second half of the home and home will be on Sunday afternoon, 3 p.m. puck drop, and that one at the Scotiabank Center. And so should be a good little weekend here. The Battle of Nova Scotia. You gotta love it.
All right, let's get some wins and let's get into the playoffs so we can have more Gareth McDonald on the air. How's that sound?
That sounds okay to me, Todd.
All right, pal. Thanks for coming in. Go Leafs, go, eh? Not looking good right now.
Sure, yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, buddy, take care. That's Gareth McDonald, voice of the Mooseheads. Cecil Wright, sports guru, joins us. Cecil, you're just listening into our conversation. What do you think about the Mooseheads' chance in the playoffs?
Well, I think Garrett said it best when he said, they don't have a tremendous amount of experience, and, that always is a determining factor in the playoffs. So, if they're able to win a series, I mean, we've all got to pat them on the back because the expectation level was not all that high. You and I have talked about this already. Was not all that high coming into this season, knowing that we were going to be relatively inexperienced compared to other former teams of the past.
Yeah, Cecil, I thought I'd give you an opportunity to say hello to Gareth. Hi.
Oh. Hey, Gareth.
Hey, how are you, Mr. Wright?
I'm doing really well. Enjoying your calling of the game, got to tell you that.
He does a fantastic job. He's also an ardent Leafs fan as well. Oh, maybe not.
No, that's not true.
Oh, it's not. I thought you were a Leafs fan.
I'm more of, when it comes to the NHL, I'm more of a Switzerland right now.
Oh, but why did I? Are you one of these abandoned the Leafs? I
think you got a few Leafs fans out here in the newsroom. I think that's you're getting me mixed up with Mark.
So you have no affiliation with any team, Gareth?
I'm neutral. I'm a peacekeeper.
Oh, Cecil, do you buy that?
Nope. I do not buy that at all.
There you go. All right. Anyway, Gareth, thanks for coming in, pal.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, appreciate it. All right, Cecil, back to you. So when it comes to Brad Marchand, what are your thoughts on Brad Marchand going to Florida? Unbelievable. I was bowled over by that. I didn't see that coming.
Well, they had been talking about the possibility of dealing him, in the weeks leading up to the trade deadline. But I didn't think that they were going to make the move. And then when they did, of course, my heart took a blow, because he's been with them so long. But they did the same thing for him that they did for Ray Bourque years ago. They're giving him an opportunity to play on a team that can win the cup. They really, in my opinion, they have no shot. Mm-hmm. I think they did him a huge favor. And he was very complimentary on the way out the door.
He sure was.
He praised Don Sweeney up and down, which really surprised me. But I think he's grown a lot. He's matured. He's turned into a classy young guy with a family. He's a dad now. And I think all that has made a difference in his life.
Yeah, whenever you trade your captain, though, that's always a tough thing to do, right? Obviously.
Yeah, but, they could potentially receive a first-round draft pick now. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the deal is it'll be a number 2, but if he plays a certain amount of games, it could turn into a number 1 draft pick. And, for a 36-year-old winger, a number 1 draft pick, you can't turn that down, especially, and a lot of people are not going to like what I'm going to say, especially when you have drafted as poorly as the Bruins have in the past.
Yeah, and Florida, I mean, they've got to be the favorite now, I would dare say. What are your thoughts on Florida?
Well, if Tkachuk is able to make it back, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Yeah. But I think that's one reason why they went after Marchand is because they're not sure if Tkachuk is going to be able to come back. And if he does, he may not be at 100%. So a guy like Brad Marchand, especially in the playoffs and, power plays and shorthanded situations, a guy like Brad Marchand can be worth his weight in gold.
Indeed. Garrett Cole, my God. Tommy John. Why would he wait so long to do this? He must have known he had a problem. Why wait till the spring?
Well, I think he just figured it'd be better so that Rafael Devers doesn't take him to the moon 6 more times this year. He tried to figure out a way of getting out of the season so he didn't get embarrassed and humiliated by the Red Sox.
Oh, my God. No, but in all seriousness, though, season-ending Tommy John surgery, he must have known in the fall he had a problem with his arm.
Well, he probably did, but, I'm sure he would have consulted with his doctor and, then got a second opinion. That takes a little bit of time, but I think he probably thought that just by giving it rest that, that would solve whatever the issue is. And fortunately for me and my team, the answer is no, that didn't solve it, and you need to go under the knife. And in all seriousness, though, I feel bad for him because, he's a gamer.
Yeah,
that's one thing that I will say about Garrett Cole is he takes the ball every 5 days and goes out there and does his best. So, these are the types of guys that you really don't want to see injuries happen to, but that's the name of the game in professional sports.
Yeah, and of course, the number of people that have had Tommy John surgery, it seems to be increasing every year. And what's going on with this? Is it players are working out too much time in the gym, throwing too much when they're young? What are some of the contributing factors here, do you think?
Well, I think that they've placed so much emphasis on velocity. Back in the old days, it was more, ball placement and hitting your spots. Now it's, throwing anywhere from 96, 98 to 100 miles an hour. That seems to be what the pitching coaches want. And I think, at trying to crank it up as much as they try, it certainly puts extra stress on the muscle structure and, the elbow specifically. And, you're seeing almost every pitcher. I would say that if you look at the 40-man roster of every major league team, and let's say that there are 15 to 17 pitchers on that roster, at least half of them have already undergone Tommy John.
Unbelievable. Just unreal.
Yep.
All right, before I let you go, anything we missed, anything local you want to talk about?
No, man, everything is in a little lull right now until baseball season starts up, and I'm praying for good weather this year because there's, once again, the U22 men's nationals are going to be here in Dartmouth and Halifax this summer, giving us another good opportunity to see some of the best young players in the country.
Okay, pal. Always appreciated, Cecil. Thanks.
Hey, I love you.
Love you too, pal. Take care. Cecil Wright, our sports guru. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Have yourself a nice weekend. Looks like the weather's going to cooperate for sure. Thanks to Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job. As always, we're back on Monday, 10 o'clock. See you then.